Broncos country, enjoy this. This right here is a long time coming. So you should be soaking up every ounce and every little news, video, article, whatever you can find on the internet related to your Denver Broncos. Because when they take down the Kansas City Chiefs, that is a day worth celebrating because it's been a long time coming. So if you enjoyed that win, before we talk about trade rumors or anything else on today's show, how about we get some FKCs going in the chat? Because the Chiefs, they might be frauds. Just going to put that out there right now. And the Broncos sitting at 3-5 could be going on a run. Now, the Broncos, let's talk trade for a second because this is really the last day. Tomorrow is the trade deadline, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And the Broncos might no longer be sellers going into the trade deadline. Sean Payton, going into the bye this week, by the way, still spoke to the media today over Zoom. And here's what Sean Payton had to say. We are not even remotely shopping anyone. Have people called? Sure they have. And typically the buyers want people to know they have called, not the seller. We are looking at the next opponent. AKA, I'll translate that coach speak to you guys to English. Blow me away with an offer I can't refuse, right? Before, if Denver might have been sitting there at 2-6 instead of 3-5, maybe they went into the trade deadline thinking, we want a second for Jerry Jeudy, but we'll take a third. Now they're sitting there thinking, we want a second for Jerry Jeudy, but we're not going to trade him unless we get an offer we can't refuse, like a first-round pick. I think that's what that win did for this team. It went from guys who were right there on the fence to being traded to being put into the side of, you're probably not going to be traded. And the guys that were probably not going to be traded are now definitely safe. I think everyone shifted over a spot. You know what I'm saying? And now Denver looks at their two star wide receivers that have been generating a lot of trade buzz, Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, and think, unless we get an offer that we would be fired because we did not accept, we're not interested in trading them away. We're sitting here at 3-5 thinking we could really start doing something. We just beat the number one team in the AFC and arguably the NFL. Why can't we play with the big dogs, right? We saw what it takes to hang with the big guys in the AFC. We took down the Kansas City Chiefs. We played them close 2 straight games now. We're going to blow it up? I'm guessing that's the kind of dialogue that's happening within Sean Payton's circle at the moment. So if you get a first rounder for Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton, I would still take it personally because there is some discussion of, as great as it was to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, does that win kind of make Denver think that there's something that they're not? And at 3-5, they're a real competitor and they're about to go on a big run and go to the postseason? Or are we going to look back in a few months and go, wow, well, as fun as that win was, and as great as it was to end the streak to Kansas City, that win ultimately made Denver feel like they are not going to be sellers. And then they finished the year winning 6 or 7 games, and I wish they moved on from some of those players while they could before the end of the season. So if you're sitting there at 3-5 and you get a first-round draft pick for Jerry Jeudy or Courtland Sutton, it'd be hard to pass on it. It'd be hard to pass on it, especially when you factor in Denver does not have a lot to work with next year. They have their first. Their second belongs to the Saints. They have 1/3. They have 1/4, 2 fifths, and a 6. That's it. 6 picks going into 2024. Sitting at 3-5, you're going to want more than 6 draft picks. But if Denver truly feels that they're about to turn 3-5 into 6-5 or 7-5, then maybe they want to keep the band together and start to go on a run and install a winning culture in this city and for this team that has been missing for nearly a decade. The team's longest playoff drought. No winning season since 2016. If they feel that this is the team to end those streaks and to start generating and growing a winning culture within the Denver Broncos organization and locker room, then who are they to blow it up and trade all their pieces away? So we'll see what George and Sean Payton, well, I say George. The big question is, does Sean Payton, George is happy to be there right now. I don't think George is making many of these decisions at all. Think this is a team that can win playoff games? Does Sean Payton think this roster can go out and win a playoff game in the AFC? If he thinks the answer to that question is yes, and he's not just BSing us, then yeah, you don't make any trades. Then you don't trade these players away, right? But if he ultimately feels like, as great as a win that was against Kansas City, we caught them at home with Mahomes having the flu, and it's a bit of a fluky win, we're just going to see what we can get for some of our best players and reset and reload for next year and really go into 2024 having a much better chance to be competitive. Sean Payton came in here wanting to win from the jump. He wanted to win preseason games. Something tells me if Sean Payton is truly committed to winning, then he's not going to tear it down right at the NFL trade deadline. But let me know what you think Denver should do. Should they be buyers? We'll talk about players they could trade for potentially. That's a first on this channel in a long time. Sellers still thinking, hey, you're drinking way too much of the Kool-Aid, Petey. They're 3-5. Don't let one win against Kansas City ruin what was a good plan going into this, which was get good draft picks for old, aging players on bad contracts. Or should they just do neither? Don't buy, don't sell, just keep the current roster as it is. So next up, we'll talk about the possibility of Denver becoming buyers. For those of you that type B in the comment section, you're going to like the next portion of today's show. But before we get into all that good stuff, support for today's show is coming in from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy sports app where all you have to do is pick more or less for 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks is super simple and user-friendly. I spend 1 to 2 minutes on the app every Sunday morning making my selections. And in fact, I made some Monday Night Football selections as well. The Raiders suck. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but let me fill you in. Josh Jacobs, I gave a hot take before the year started that Javonte Williams would end the year with more rushing yards than Josh Jacobs. Looking like it's on a good path right now, don't you think? So I'm taking the less on Josh Jacobs, half a touchdown, more for Jared Goff at 252.5 passing yards, and more for Amon-Ra St. Brown at 79.5 passing yards. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that, by the way, is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. For those of you that want to entertain the idea of, why don't you go out and buy? Well, you look at the remaining schedule for Denver, and they're sitting there at 3-5, going into the bye, coming out of the bye, playing on Monday Night Football at Buffalo, which sounds scary until you remember the Bills are frauds. They are not good. So that could be a winnable game off a bye. Who says no? Week 11, you come home and you play, I have no idea who's going to be the starting quarterback for Minnesota moving forward, but a 4-4 Vikings team. Then you got the Browns and their, unclarity at quarterback situation with Deshaun Watson and his shoulder injury. Week 13 at Houston. They just lost to the worst team in football, the Carolina Panthers. Then you got the Chargers in Week 14. That'll be tough on the road. Lions on the road. That'll be tough. Patriots at home. They suck. Week 17 at home. You beat the Chargers last time at home. Why can't make it 2 in a row? And then you got Week 18 at the Raiders. And I don't care if they've beaten the Broncos since they moved to Vegas every single time. They still suck. So there is definitely a path for Sean Payton to buy in on. Maybe we should at least be standing pat or buyers because we've got a good schedule coming up here. The defense is coming together. The offense is finally finding an identity. But I think at a 1-5 start, it's just too big of a hurdle to overcome. I know that you want me to come up here right now and give a good rah-rah speech about how Denver's about to win 5 or 6 in a row and they're going to go to the playoffs and they should be buyers or they should be standing pat at least. But ultimately, when you're 3-5, that's a tough hurdle to overcome. And we've seen a lot of bad football from this team. And they have improved recently, no question about it. But I got to see more from them. I got to see more. It can't just be back-to-back home wins against a losing Packers team and a flu-like game for Patrick Mahomes, right? We need to see another good performance like this. If the trade deadline and the Bills game was swapped and they went into Buffalo and won, I'd have a completely different tune. But for now, I think it might not sound great right now, but in January or February, if they trade Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton and they get a good pick out of those guys, we're going to be happy about this move if they end up falling short. And if they don't trade them and we go into January and February and they've got 6 or 7 wins to their name, we're going to be really upset that they did not make some more moves before the deadline. And I don't want to be the guy I told you so, but I feel an I told you so moment coming in a few months from now. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's show, I do want to mention that the Washington Commanders might be big-time sellers. So Ron Rivera, this comes from a Commanders beat reporter, by the way. Ron Rivera declines to talk about anything related to the trade deadline. Once we get past tomorrow, we'll probably have something to talk about. AKA, we have some trades coming down the pipeline, and they're going to happen tomorrow. So if you want Denver to be buyers still, despite my pitch as to don't be buyers, well, here are 2 guys they could go out and get at the edge rusher spot from Washington. Montez Sweat and Chase Young have been 2 of the highest rumored players to be traded before tomorrow's deadline. Sweat this year, 6.5 sacks. Chase Young in a really strong bounce-back year, up to 5 sacks. I think if you're looking between these 2 guys, whether it's Montez Sweat or Chase Young or Danielle Hunter or some other premier edge rusher, only trade for Sweat, Young, or anyone else for that matter if you believe they are worth an extension and are going to be here beyond 2023. Denver is not in a spot to give up a good draft pick for a 1-year rental. Kind of like Leonard Williams to the Seahawks a few hours ago. Seattle's at 5-2. They can give up a second rounder for a guy they might only have for the remainder of the year. Because if they go out and win it all, it'll be worth it. Denver, they have not earned that right. When you're sitting at 3-5, you do not give up good draft picks for 1-year rentals. You give up good draft picks if you feel like there's a diamond in the rough, right? And this guy got lost like a needle in a haystack, and you can get him for a cheap draft pick, and you're going to turn his career around, and you're going to give him a new contract, and he's going to be a signature part of your defense or offense or whatever position he plays. That is the only circumstance Denver should be going out and trading for players, not for 1-year rentals. Now, what do you guys think? Should the Broncos add an edge rusher? Type T for trade or type P for pass. Let me know if you think the Broncos should go out and add a Montez Sweat, a Chase Young, or some other edge rusher to help this defense out and help turn around a 3-5 start to the year. Personally, I kind of like what you have at your edge rusher spot, right? Jonathon Cooper, 4.5 sacks. Nick Bonitto, 5.5 sacks. Baron Browning has not even been back for more than 3 weeks. He's already up to 2 sacks and 10 pressures. And Zach Allen will include him because he plays defensive end. He's up to 3 sacks and 26 pressures. I personally would roll with these 3 edge rushers and Zach Allen. If anything, if you are truly dying to add a little bit more juice and firepower to your roster, go add a cornerback. That is a much bigger need than edge rusher. Because I think whether it's just this year or moving forward, you've got a good trio between Bonitto, Cooper, and Baron Browning. Add a little bit more volume to that through the draft or free agency, and you're ready to roll. I don't think this is a team that needs to go out and trade a second rounder for Chase Young. I just don't think that's a good timing move for them based on where they're at right now. Now, like I said, you could go get a new cornerback because neither of these guys are really cutting it. Like Damarri Mathis, I don't know if you guys have noticed, he got benched 2 weeks ago for the Packers game after the Chiefs loss on Thursday Night Football. Since then, Fabian Moreau has filled in, and he's been better, but anyone could be better because Damarri Mathis was literally the worst cornerback in the National Football League. 361 yards allowed and 4 touchdowns in 6 starts. Like, those are the kinds of numbers DBs give up sometimes over the course of an entire season. He hit his max in 6 games. Moreau's been better, but because anyone would have been better from Damarri Mathis' play the first 6 games. So if you want to find another guy to add to your defense, go find a new CB2. Now, before we get on out of here, a quick plug. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because it's going to be a hectic day tomorrow. I don't want you to miss a thing, and you won't miss a thing when you're subscribed and you have your notifications on too.